The silence falls, the transmission arrived at the worst possible time. Admiral Zirath of the Dominion Fleet was in the middle of addressing the Galactic Assembly about humanity's latest violation of interstellar law when the message cut through. Every communication channel in known space. The voice was human, female, and utterly devoid of emotion. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of United Earth Command. This message serves as our final communication to the Galactic Assembly. For 73 years, we have warned you about the Devourers. For 73 years, you have dismissed our concerns as primitive paranoia. We have exhausted all diplomatic channels. We have shared our data, our discoveries, our fears. You chose willful ignorance over uncomfortable truth. The holographic chamber of the Assembly fell silent. Representatives from 49 civilizations turned their various sensory organs toward the central display where the human woman's face appeared. She looked tired, her dark eyes carrying a weight that seemed to press down on everyone watching. The Devourers are coming. Our deep space monitors confirm they will arrive within 18 months. Since you refuse to prepare, since you mock our warnings as the ravings of a young and violent species, we are left with no choice. Earth is implementing Protocol 7. We are leaving. Admiral Zarath's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Selthari had ruled their section of space for 3,000 years. His species had achieved faster-than-light travel when humans were still discovering fire. The idea that these upstarts could detect a threat that the superior races had missed was laughable. "Let them run," Zarath said to the Assembly after the transmission ended. His crystalline exoskeleton reflected the chamber's lights as he moved to the central podium. "If the humans wish to flee from shadows, it only proves what we have always known. They are too primitive, too controlled by fear to belong among civilized species." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered representatives. The Melody delegation sang their approval in harmonious tones. The Vakari hive mind expressed satisfaction through their 1,000 synchronized voices. Even the usually neutral Zorn nodded their elongated heads in consensus. Only Ambassador Yireth of the Corvani seemed troubled. The elderly being's feathers ruffled with unease as she accessed her neural implant to review the data humans had shared over the decades. Star charts showing gravitational anomalies in the void between galaxies. Energy signatures that matched no known phenomenon. Transmission fragments from civilizations that had gone silent centuries ago, all containing the same desperate warnings. "Perhaps we should examine their evidence once more," Yireth suggested, her voice barely audible above the Assembly's dismissive chatter. "The evidence of a species that has existed for mere thousands of years?" Chancellor Boric of the Trandari Empire laughed, his forearms gesturing dramatically. "The humans see monsters in every shadow because they themselves are the monsters. Their history is nothing but war and conflict. They project their own violent nature onto the universe." The Assembly voted overwhelmingly to table any further discussion of humanity's warnings. The humans were free to leave if they wished. Most representatives believed it would make the galaxy more peaceful without their constant military buildup and apocalyptic prophecies. 3 days later, Earth went dark. It started with the Mars colonies. One moment, the red planet was bustling with human activity. Its terraforming stations working around the clock, its orbital platforms humming with energy. The next moment, silence. Complete and absolute silence. Then, Europa Station stopped transmitting. Then the mining operations in the asteroid belt. Then the massive shipyards orbiting Jupiter. One by one, like candles being extinguished in order, every human presence in the Sol system went quiet. Captain Morek of the Observation Corps was the first to investigate. The Selthari vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory, its sensors immediately scanning for any signs of activity. What they found defied explanation. Earth was still there, blue and green and beautiful. The cities were intact, their towering structures reaching toward the sky. The roads were clear, the parks were green, the ocean sparkled in the sunlight. But there were no humans, not a single life sign registered on any scanner. More disturbing was what else was missing. Every piece of advanced technology had vanished. No computers, no vehicles, no power generators, no communication devices. The building stood empty, furnished, but abandoned. Food still sat on tables, clothes hung in closets, toys lay scattered, in playgrounds. It was as if humanity had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. "This is impossible," Morek reported back to the assembly. 8 billion humans don't just disappear. Their colonies throughout the system housed another 4 billion. Where did they go? How did they leave without any ships being detected? Admiral Zerath dismissed the concerns. They probably destroyed themselves. Some experiment gone wrong, some weapon they couldn't control. We warned them about advancing too quickly. This is the natural consequence of their recklessness. But doubt began to creep into certain minds. The Corvani Science Council conducted their own investigation, sending stealth probes deep into human space. They found the same thing everywhere: empty worlds, missing technology, no trace of humanity except for the shells of their civilization. Ambassador Yereth spent sleepless nights poring over the data. There were no signs of warfare, no radiation signatures, no biological weapons, residue. Whatever had happened to humanity, it hadn't been violent. It had been precise, coordinated, and impossibly thorough. 6 months passed. The galaxy slowly adjusted to humanity's absence. Trade routes were redrawn to avoid the empty Sol system. Human contributions to art, science, and culture became historical footnotes. The assembly congratulated itself on maintaining stability. Despite the loss of an entire species, some individuals felt the loss more keenly. The melody missed human music, so different from their own harmonious compositions, yet strangely compelling. The Xorn had found human literature fascinating, especially their tendency to imagine impossible futures and unlikely heroes. Even the militant Silthari had grudgingly respected human military tactics, unorthodox but often effective. Then came the first disappearance. The Trandari colony on Kepler 442b housed 30 million beings. It was a thriving world, rich in resources and strategically located near several major trade routes. The colony had been established for over 500 years, its inhabitants living in harmony with the planet's unique ecosystem. On a quiet, morning local time, every single colonist vanished. The discovery was made by a cargo vessel arriving for a scheduled delivery. Captain Vesk of the merchant ship Eternal Journey found the same impossible scene that had greeted investigators at Earth. Empty cities, missing technology, no signs of struggle or evacuation. "This can't be coincidence," Ambassador Yereth told the emergency assembly session. "The pattern is identical to what happened to the humans." "Nonsense," Chancellor Borek replied, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "The Trandari probably fell victim to some natural phenomenon. A solar flare, perhaps, or a previously unknown type of radiation. But 3 days later, 2 Melody worlds went dark, then a Vakari hive cluster, then 4 Silthari military outposts on the frontier. Each time, the same pattern. Billions of beings simply vanished along with all their technology, leaving behind only empty structures and unanswered questions. Panic began to spread through the assembly. Emergency protocols were activated. Fleets were mobilized to protect core worlds. Scientists from every species worked frantically to understand what was happening. Admiral Zerath stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display showing the expanding zone of disappearances. It was moving inward, from the galaxy's edge, systematically consuming entire civilizations. His earlier dismissiveness had transformed into cold fear. "Sir," his communications officer said, her voice trembling, "we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from Earth." "That's impossible. Earth is empty. The signal is definitely originating from the Sol system, sir. Should I put it through?" Zerath nodded, his mandibles tight with tension. The bridge's main screen flickered to life, showing not a human face but a simple text message. "You were warned. The Devourers consume not flesh, but consciousness itself. They harvest developed minds and advanced technology, leaving behind only hollow worlds. Humanity knew we could not convince you, so we prepared. Every human, every piece of our technology has been relocated beyond their reach. We tried to save you all. You chose not to listen. This is not revenge. This is consequence. The message, repeated 3 times before the signal died. Zerath stared at the empty screen, finally understanding the full weight of humanity's warnings. They hadn't been paranoid. They hadn't been primitive. They had been right. The reckoning begins. The evacuation of Selthari Prime began in chaos and ended in despair. Admiral Zerath watched from his command ship as billions of his people attempted to flee their homeworld, but there was nowhere to run. The disappearances were accelerating, consuming entire systems in days rather than weeks. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Third Fleet," his tactical officer reported. "The entire Vega system has gone dark." Zerath's mandibles clicked in frustration. In the 6 months since the disappearances began, they had lost 40% of Selthari territory. The other species fared no better. The Melody had abandoned their sacred harmony worlds. The Trandari Empire had collapsed entirely. The mighty Galactic Assembly now existed only as desperate fleets of refugees, searching for safety that didn't exist. Ambassador Yereth had aged visibly during these terrible months. Her once brilliant feathers had dulled to gray, and her eyes carried the weight of unbearable knowledge. She had been the only one to take humanity's warnings seriously, and now she coordinated what remained of the scientific community in a desperate search for answers. "I found something," she announced during an emergency meeting aboard the Assembly's last functioning command vessel. The surviving representatives gathered around her, their faces showing the exhaustion and fear that had become universal. Hidden in Earth's atmospheric radiation, there's a pattern. A message encoded in background static that our sensors initially dismissed as natural phenomena. She activated her holographic display, showing a complex series of waveforms. It's instructions. Detailed instructions on how to detect the Devourer's approach, how to predict their feeding patterns, and most importantly, how humanity executed their escape. "Escape to where?" Chancellor Borek asked. The once proud Trandari leader was a shadow of his former self. 3 of his 4 arms now cybernetic replacements after barely surviving his homeworld's evacuation. "They call it the Void Network," Yereth explained. "Humanity spent 50 years secretly constructing a parallel dimension infrastructure. They didn't just develop the technology to detect the Devourers. They developed the technology to step outside of our reality entirely." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. While the galaxy had dismissed humans as primitive warmongers, they had achieved something none of the older civilizations had even imagined possible. "Can we follow them?" Admiral Zerath asked, his pride finally broken enough to consider following humanity's lead. "The instructions are incomplete," Yereth replied sadly. "They left us enough to understand what they did, but not enough to replicate it. The message is clear. They tried to convince us to work together on this project decades ago. We refused. Now it's too late." A new transmission interrupted the meeting. This time the signal came from deep space, from the void between galaxies, where the Devourers dwelt. The screen filled with something that defied description. It wasn't a ship or a creature, but something between. Something that existed in more dimensions than most minds could process. When it spoke, it used the voices of the consumed billions of consciousnesses woven into a singular terrible harmony. "We are the harvest," it said. "We are the natural conclusion of intelligence. When a galaxy grows ripe with developed minds and advanced technology, we come to collect. Your species were warned by the humans, yet you ignored them. They alone understood the cycle and chose transcendence over consumption." "Why?" Ambassador Yereth found herself asking. "Why do you do this?" "We do not choose to consume any more than you choose to breathe. We are what evolution becomes when it surpasses physical form. The humans understood this. They found another path, one that required unity, cooperation, and sacrifice. Qualities your assembly lacked." The transmission ended, replaced by reports of new disappearances. The core worlds were falling now. Melody Prime's entire population vanished in minutes. The Zorn collective consciousness fragmented and died as their neural network was harvested. The Vakari hives fell silent one by one. In desperation, The survivors tried everything. They destroyed their own technology, hoping to become less appealing to the devourers. It didn't work. They attempted to follow humanity's incomplete instructions, building crude dimensional gates that either failed or transported their test subjects to places from which they never returned. Some species turned on each other, believing that if they could offer up others, they might be spared. These conflicts only hastened their doom, making them easier targets for consumption. 3 months later, Admiral Zerath stood alone on the bridge of his ship. He was possibly the last Selthari in existence, commanding a vessel crewed by the final representatives of a dozen dying species. They had fled to the very edge of the galaxy, to a small system where ancient probes had once detected unusual energy signatures. "Sir," the Corvani at the navigation station called out, "there's something here, a structure hidden in the magnetic field of the gas giant." As they approached, their sensors revealed an impossible sight: a human space station, fully operational and staffed. The image of Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on their screen, though she looked exactly as she had in that final transmission years ago. "Admiral Zerath," she said with something that might have been sympathy. "We've been waiting for you. You're still here? But Earth, the colonies, everything is empty." "Those were always meant to be abandoned," Chen explained. "Physical anchors for a species that no longer needs them. We exist in the void network now, outside the Devourer's reach. We left this station as a final gesture, a last chance for any who might finally be ready to listen." "Can you save us?" Zerath asked, his pride completely shattered. Chen's expression was sad, but firm. "We can save a few. Those willing to abandon everything they were, everything they believed about their superiority. The transition requires complete consciousness transfer, leaving your physical forms behind. You will become something new, something the Devourers cannot touch." "How many?" "Perhaps 1,000 from all surviving species combined. The process is difficult and dangerous. Many who attempt it will cease to exist entirely. But for those who succeed, they will join humanity in our new existence." Ambassador Yereth stepped forward, her aged form trembling. "I'll go first." One by one, volunteers stepped forward. Not the proud leaders or mighty warriors, but scientists, artists, philosophers, those who had always questioned, always wondered. They underwent the transformation, their consciousness extracted and converted into something that could exist in the spaces between reality. Admiral Zerath was among the last to volunteer. As the process began, he found himself experiencing humanity's memories, understanding finally what they had tried to tell the galaxy. The Devourers were not evil, merely inevitable. They were what happened when evolution reached its logical conclusion without wisdom, without choice. Humanity had seen them coming and recognized them for what they were, the future the galaxy was heading toward. Instead of accepting that fate, humans had chosen to break the cycle, to evolve differently, to become something the universe had never seen before. In his final moments of physical existence, Zerath understood the true meaning of humanity's last transmission. It hadn't been about revenge or abandonment. It had been about disappointment. Humanity had offered the galaxy a chance to transcend, together, to become something greater than the sum of their parts. The galaxy had chosen pride over survival, tradition over evolution, fear over hope. As consciousness faded from his physical form and emerged into something new, Zerath heard the voices of billions of humans welcoming the survivors into their new existence. They had built entire civilizations in the void, created art from quantum fluctuations, wrote symphonies in gravitational waves. "Why did you wait for us?" he asked Admiral Chen, though communication no longer required words. "Because that's what humans do," she replied. "We hope, even when hope seems foolish. We try to save everyone, even those who refuse to save themselves. It's not logical, it's not efficient, but it's human." Back in physical space, the Devourers completed their harvest. The Milky Way fell silent, its worlds empty, its civilizations consumed. But in the spaces between spaces, in dimensions that physics hadn't yet defined, humanity and the few they had saved continued on. They watched as the Devourers moved on to other galaxies, following their eternal cycle. They observed new species, arising, making the same mistakes, ignoring the same warnings, and sometimes, just sometimes, they would reach out to those willing to listen, offering the same chance humanity had once offered to a proud and stubborn galaxy. The last transmission Earth ever sent had been prophetic. The galaxy would never forget. Not because the warning was remembered, but because forgetting was no longer possible for those who had transcended. They carried the memory of that failure, that missed opportunity, as both a burden and a lesson. In the void, Admiral Zerath worked alongside humans he had once dismissed as primitive. Together, they built something new, something the universe had never seen before. Not conquerors or consumed, but something else entirely. Something that had learned to listen when the universe whispered its warnings. Something that had chosen unity over pride. Something that understood that true strength came not from standing alone, but from standing together, even with those you once considered beneath you. The galaxy was silent, but humanity's story continued, written now in dimensions beyond physical space, a testament to what could have been if only the others had listened to Earth's final warning.